how you see the future of Ukraine and Russia relationship and Russia and West relationship?
Well, it's hard to see any particularly positive signs for the Russian-Ukrainian relationship. I think that what will happen in due course will, almost as a matter of necessity, be a freezing of the current conflict. I don't think that there'll be any particular expansion of the rebel-held areas, with the possible exception of Mariupol. But on the other hand, nor do I think that the rebels either will be defeated militarily imminently, nor will they actually go through with the Minsk II agreement and hand their lands back to Kiev's control. So one way or the other, I think we're heading for, at least for another year or two, a frozen conflict. And that will obviously poison Ukrainian-Russian relations. Ultimately, Kiev and Moscow have to talk on some issues. There are issues of trade and energy, mutual border control and so forth. But in effect, let's face it, Russia and Ukraine are at war. And therefore it's a question of managing the impact of that as far as possible. And likewise for Russia's relations with the West, I don't see them improving so long as the current regime is in the Kremlin. It's not going to get, I think, dramatically worse. I know that there are always concerns about whether or not Russia has military designs on Estonia or similar. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Russia will continue to be an aggressive but mischievous more than imperialistic power. It wants to keep the West unable to impact Russia rather than actually do anything dramatic to the West. But I think it means that we are in, again, for a long-term period of considerable instability and friction that I call a hot peace.
Thank you very much. The second question, is Putin a system or the ultimate power? If he will truly disappear, how the Russian will change and will it change?
This is a system. Obviously, Putin himself is the single most important figure within the system. He is the decider. He's the one who gets to make the final decisions when there's competition between blocs. But he himself does not obviously handle most day-to-day decision-making. He himself does not run the country. There is a whole pyramid of little Putins who actually run the country. That said, though, I think in some ways Putin is actually different from the little Putins. The rest of the elite are essentially ambitious, opportunistic, pragmatic, and self-interested. Putin himself, I think, is increasingly genuinely ideological in how he sees his mission and how he sees Russia's place in the world. And I think that's actually beginning to create a tension. So that if Putin did disappear, was toppled by a political coup, dies, whatever, then I think the next figure will not be like Putin as he is now. They'll want to have someone who actually is much more pragmatic rather than someone who's going to drag Russia into more and more imperial adventures. So that, for example, I think in terms of the conflict, if Putin went, then I think there'd be more chance that there'd be some kind of a deal over Donbass.
Thank you. Recently, like I think 2 days ago, Russian channel Russia 24 presented a movie about Crimea, and there was an interview with Mr. Putin who basically admitted that they had their forces there during the referendum. Firstly, is it really delegitimized referendum before? And is it really proves that Russia breached the Budapest Memorandum?
No, we knew all this beforehand. There was never any question that the little green men were Russian Spetsnaz and naval infantry. There was no question but that the referendum was handled at the point of a Russian gun. Although it may well be that a majority of Crimeans actually did support it, all we know is that earlier, more open opinion polls actually said that while Crimeans wanted to be autonomous within Ukraine, they weren't necessarily saying that they wanted to be part of Russia. So we don't really know the result. But the main thing is, look, it's interesting because Putin finally actually came out and admitted what we all knew to be the case. And I think it says something about his level of confidence. But we should not really have been fooled from the beginning. This was always an invasion, nothing more.
Yeah, I mean, it was expectable, but the thing is, like, he finally came out with this. He's saying that on the whole, like, national level, and everybody, like, ignored that. Isn't?
Well, I mean, again, this is the problem the West has got. It's how to actually respond. How should that change policy? The point is that we know, we have known that this was an invasion, a land grab, nothing more than that. The sad truth of the matter is that the West is really not particularly willing to go much further than it is now. And I think Putin realized that, and that's why he could sort of make his boast, which after all plays well within Russia, plays well to the nationalist constituency that Putin likes to play to. But he knew that it wasn't going to really change how the West act.
Okay, thank you. And the last question. It's visible that people changed after Maidan. Did Ukrainian government really change after Maidan? You can see it like from the other side. I think it's easier for you to notice.
I mean, just as in some ways the Russian system is a whole pyramid of mini Putins, unfortunately the Ukrainian system was in some ways many Yanukovyches. So of course the government has changed. And with it, there has been both a sort of, obviously the enthusiasm and optimism of Maidan and different people, different faces. The problem is, in a way, it doesn't matter who is there, it's what they do. And the current focus on the war has really allowed or forced people to ignore the structural reforms that are needed. Let's be honest, however terrible what's going on in the Donbass is, the deepest and most fundamental challenges facing Ukraine are a crisis of governance, corruption, inefficiency, and so forth. And there, unfortunately, it's much harder to be optimistic. There are people who know the answers, but on the other hand, we have a government that, for whatever reason, seems less willing to actually take these unpopular steps to really make Ukraine what it could be, and also make Ukraine more appealing as a potential partner for the West in the future.